The world knew David Bowie as the alien who fell to Earth, the androgynous spaceman with flame-red hair and lightning bolt painted across his face. But on one summer night in London, beneath the glittering lights of the Hammersmith Odeon, 15,000 people witnessed something that would transcend performance, transcend music, transcend even Ziggy Stardust himself. They witnessed the moment when one man's courage became a generation's awakening. What happened that night wasn't planned, wasn't rehearsed, and wasn't something any manager or publicist could have prepared for. It was raw, dangerous, and utterly transformative. Before we dive into this untold story, if you're fascinated by the hidden moments that changed music history, the backstage dramas and personal struggles behind the legends, subscribe to this channel. We uncover the stories they never told you about David Bowie, the secrets, the scandals, the human moments that made him more than just a rock star. Hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear has never been fully revealed until now. David Robert Jones grew up in Brixton, South London, in a council house where secrets were impossible to keep. His half-brother Terry Burns was 8 years older, brilliant, troubled, and slowly descending into schizophrenia. Young David watched Terry's mind fracture like a mirror dropped on concrete, and he wondered if the same madness lived inside his own DNA. By 1970, David had changed his name to Bowie, released several albums that nobody bought, and was considered a one-hit wonder for space oddity. He was 23 years old, broke, married to Angie Barnett, and desperate for something that would make the world pay attention. What he found wasn't just a persona. It was a revolution wrapped in glitter and platform boots. The transformation began with a simple observation. Bowie noticed that masculinity in rock music had become a cage, a set of unbreakable rules about how men should look, move, and express themselves. Mick Jagger could strut, but there were limits. Robert Plant could bare his chest, but within boundaries. Even Mark Bolan with T-Rex stayed within invisible lines. Bowie decided to erase those lines entirely. He started experimenting with makeup, studying kabuki theater and mime artist Lindsay Kemp, learning that gender could be performance. In January 1972, he told Melody Maker magazine 3 words that detonated like a bomb across conservative Britain. "I'm gay," later clarified to bisexual. Not hinting, not implying, just stating it as fact. But saying it wasn't enough. Bowie needed a vehicle, a character that could carry this message with force. That's when Ziggy Stardust was born. An alien rock star from space, sent to Earth to save humanity through music in the 5 years before the world's end. Ziggy was everything David Jones wasn't allowed to be. Flamboyant, sexually ambiguous, shameless, fearless. The album dropped June 16, 1972, and within weeks, Britain's youth showed up to concerts in homemade costumes, faces painted, boys kissing boys, girls kissing girls, because suddenly permission had been granted to be free. By summer 1972, Ziggy wasn't just popular. He was a cultural phenomenon that terrified parents and electrified teenagers. Death threats arrived weekly at management offices. Religious groups protested outside venues with signs declaring Bowie a servant of Satan. Tabloids screamed about the degeneration of British values, the feminization of young men, the end of civilization. But Bowie wasn't trying to destroy masculinity. He was trying to expand it, to show that a man could be tender and fierce, vulnerable and strong, beautiful and powerful all at once. Mick Ronson would kneel at Bowie's feet during Suffragette City, and sometimes they'd almost kiss. Sometimes they would kiss, and teenage boys watching felt something shift inside their understanding of what was possible. Not everyone celebrated. At concerts across Britain, there were regular confrontations. Audience members shouting slurs, throwing bottles, rushing the stage to defend traditional manhood from this glittering threat. Security teams learned to expect violence. Bouncers positioned strategically, watching for signs of someone about to snap. Fights erupted regularly, usually started by drunk older men enraged by what they saw. Bowie's crew developed evacuation protocols, ways to get him off stage quickly if things turned dangerous. But Bowie seemed unafraid, or perhaps he'd decided fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. He'd created Ziggy to liberate, not to hide. And on July 3, 1973, at Hammersmith Odeon, that philosophy would be tested in ways no one anticipated. Hammersmith Odeon was a beautiful Art Deco palace, the kind of venue where Hollywood premieres happened alongside rock concerts. That warm July evening, fans had queued since dawn, many in costume, faces painted with lightning bolts, wearing platform boots they could barely walk in. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke, sweat, and anticipation. When lights dropped at 8:30, the roar was deafening. Then the spotlight hit. Ziggy Stardust in a skin-tight jumpsuit covered in multicolored sequins, hair impossibly red, makeup perfect, platform boots adding 4 inches to his frame. He looked alien, beautiful, dangerous, divine. For the first hour, the show was everything it should be. Bowie prowled the stage, Ronson's guitar screamed, the audience sang every word. Then, during the quiet introduction to Width of a Circle, it happened. A man's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage, cut through the music. "You're not a real man!" Bowie stopped mid-lyric. The band continued briefly before trailing into silence. 15,000 people held their breath. Security moved toward the voice, but Bowie raised his hand, stopping them. He walked to the stage edge and peered into the front rows, searching. The drunk man was in his 40s, stocky work shirt and jeans, face red with fury. He swayed among Ziggy disciples who'd gone silent. "Prove it!" he shouted, voice breaking. "Prove you're a man! Take off that makeup! Stop dressing like a woman! You're confusing our kids! You're destroying everything!" The theater went quiet enough to hear breathing. Every eye locked on Bowie. Would he dismiss the heckler? Signal security? Ignore it? What happened next? Nobody expected. Bowie sat down on the stage edge, legs dangling, platform boots swinging. He gestured to the band to stay quiet, then looked at the drunk man with no anger, just something like compassion. When he spoke, his voice was soft, intimate. "Brother," he said deliberately, "I understand you're frightened." The man blinked, fists clenched but posture wavering. Bowie continued slowly. "You want me to prove I'm a man, but help me understand something first. What is a man? Is it the clothes, the makeup, who we love, how we walk or talk?" The drunk man opened his mouth, but Bowie raised his hand gently. "Please let me finish. I promise you'll get your turn." People froze, hardly believing this was happening. Bowie's voice grew stronger. "I grew up in Brixton. I had a father who worked hard, came home tired, didn't talk about feelings because men didn't do that. I watched him disappear inside himself, become a ghost, because he'd been taught real men don't cry, don't show weakness, don't admit fear. My brother Terry is in a mental hospital now. One reason why? He couldn't express feelings. He'd been taught men are strong, silent, in control. So pain built up until his mind broke. The theater was utterly silent. Even the drunk man had stopped swaying. Bowie stood, voice rising. "So when you ask me to prove I'm a man, I have to ask which definition you want. Silent about feelings? Done with that? Hide who I love? Tried that. It was killing me. Dress for your comfort? Why is your comfort more important than my freedom?" The crowd murmured agreement. Bowie addressed everyone. "I'm not here to destroy manhood. I'm here to expand it, to show a man can be tender and strong, can wear makeup and be brave, can love another man and be fully, completely male. He turned back to the heckler, voice softening. You said I'm confusing your kids, but maybe I'm giving them permission to ask questions, to explore who they are without shame. Isn't that what we want? Freedom to become their fullest selves? The drunk man's eyes were wet, his fists unclenched. The rage had transformed into grief. My son, the man said, voice breaking, wants to be like you, wants to wear makeup, grow his hair. I don't understand. I don't know how to talk to him anymore. Bowie knelt on stage, eye level with the man. Then talk to him about that. Tell him you don't understand. Tell him you're scared. Tell him you love him anyway. Because that's real strength. Not pretending you have answers. Not hiding behind anger. Being honest about fear and choosing love anyway. The drunk man stared at Bowie, tears streaming. Then he nodded once, turned, and pushed through the crowd toward the exit. People parted silently. When doors closed, the theater erupted. Not applause at first, but collective emotional release. People crying, hugging strangers, holding each other. Bowie stood, brushed off his sequined jumpsuit, and signaled the band. Width of a circle began again, but something fundamental had shifted. The concert continued 90 minutes more, but everyone knew they'd witnessed something beyond performance. Backstage, Bowie removed makeup with cold cream, watching Ziggy disappear and David Jones re-emerge. Manager Ken Pitt entered, shaken. That was either the bravest or most insane thing you've done. Possibly both. Bowie met his eyes in the mirror. What else could I do? That man wasn't angry at me. He was terrified of losing his son. Pitt nodded. You know this will be in every paper tomorrow. They'll paint you as saint or destroyer. No middle ground. Bowie turned, face half clean, Ziggy's makeup on one side, David's bare skin on the other. I know. That's why tonight was the last night. Pitt didn't understand. The last night of what? Bowie stood, exhausted. Ziggy's last night. I'm killing him. What the audience didn't know, what even the band didn't know, was that 3 days later at the same venue, Bowie would announce Ziggy's death, shocking 5,000 people who thought they were attending another concert. But July 3rd was the real ending, the moment Bowie realized Ziggy had completed his mission. The confrontation was never officially recorded, never filmed, existing only in witness memories. Or so everyone thought. In 2003, a cassette tape surfaced at auction. Someone had brought a portable recorder that night, capturing the entire exchange. Sound quality was poor, muffled, but words were clear. Bowie bought it himself through a proxy, paying far more than it was worth, and reportedly listened alone in his studio. In a 2017 Guardian interview, he was asked about that night. That man and I both needed that conversation. He needed to hear loving his son mattered more than understanding everything. I needed to remember why I created Ziggy, not for fame, but to give people permission to be free. The journalist pushed. Do you know what happened to him? To his son? Bowie smiled knowingly. I do. About a year later, I received a letter from a young man. His father had come home acting strange, quiet, went into his son's room and they talked all night. Really talked. The father didn't suddenly understand everything, didn't become progressive, but he listened. He saw his son. Over time, they found a way to love each other across their differences. The father never loved my music, never felt comfortable with androgyny, but learned his discomfort wasn't his son's problem to solve. That approach became central to Bowie's career for 4 decades. When confronted with hatred, he rarely responded with aggression. Instead, he asked questions, sought understanding looked for human pain driving hostility. It wasn't always successful. Plenty of critics remained unmoved, but for every closed mind, dozens of hearts opened, lives changed. Young people who saw Bowie in sequins and understood their difference wasn't a flaw, but a gift. Musicians from Prince to Lady Gaga walked through doors he'd kicked open. But the most profound impact was on ordinary people who never performed. The closeted teenager who saw Bowie and realized survival was possible. The father who remembered Hammersmith, remembered grace in response to anger, and tried the same when his daughter came out 20 years later. The heckler's son eventually came forward after Bowie's 2016 death. Michael Patterson told Q magazine the complete story in 2017. His father Thomas, an East London factory worker and World War II veteran, had been shaped by rigid masculinity that suffocated him during peace. When Michael showed interest in Bowie's music, wore makeup, questioned sexuality, Thomas reacted with anger. The Hammersmith night, Thomas went specifically to confront Bowie, drunk enough for courage, determined to defend his son by shaming the source. What happened changed both lives. Thomas came home and did something unprecedented. Sat on Michael's bed and admitted fear, scared of losing his son to a world he didn't understand. Scared everything he believed about being a man was wrong. Scared his rigidity would cost him the relationship he valued most. Michael, 17 and terrified, listened as his father cried for the first time in his memory. They didn't solve everything that night. Thomas never fully understood bisexuality, never became comfortable with androgyny, but he learned to love his son without conditions, to accept that not understanding didn't mean something was wrong. Thomas Patterson died in 1989. At his funeral, Michael placed a cassette in his coffin, a bootleg of July 3, 1973, including the confrontation when a rock star in glitter showed more grace than Thomas thought possible. Michael told Q magazine his father listened dozens of times over years, not for the music, but to remember the lesson. Being a man wasn't about being right or strong or in control. It was being honest about fear and choosing love anyway. When Bowie died in 2016, Michael Patterson was 59, living in Brighton with his husband of 20 years, running a small art gallery specializing in 70s music memorabilia. He put Bowie's photo in the window, Ziggy in full regalia, with a handwritten sign underneath. "Thank you for teaching my father how to love me." The story of Hammersmith Odeon, July 3, 1973, reminds us that revolution happens in unexpected moments, in space between anger and understanding, in choosing compassion over aggression. Bowie could have destroyed that heckler with wit, could have had him ejected, could have ignored him entirely. Instead, he sat on the stage edge, made himself vulnerable, and offered a hand across the divide. That moment didn't change the world overnight, but it changed two lives completely, and through them rippled out to touch countless others. In the end, that's what Ziggy Stardust was always about. Not the costumes or makeup or platform boots, not even the music. It was showing people that difference isn't something to fear, but to celebrate. That boundaries we're taught, boxes we're placed in, rules about who we're allowed to be are all negotiable. Sometimes it just takes one person brave enough to stand on stage in sequins and say, "I refuse to be what you expect. I choose to be free." And in that choice, offering freedom to everyone watching.